I was going through the TLC workbook, you know,
Mm-hmm.
trying to refresh my memory and trying
Mm-hmm.
to see, you know, a lot of, and I read an interesting statement by John Nesbitt. Is it Red? I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
the name like that.
Mm-hmm.
He's the author of Megatrends.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm gonna read what he says. It's one of those quotes that is placed on the main page in the
Yeah.
book. So he says, in the stream of time, the future is always with us. The directions and turns the world will take are embedded in the past and in the present. We often recognize them retrospectively, but our purpose is to anticipate what lies ahead. Now, what we're facing today, do you believe this is still valid? What I mean is, can we truly rely today on past trends to define tomorrow?
Okay, I love this question, and I'm going to bring in or integrate into my answer one of Jim and Barry's past publications that was called Turning Adversity into Opportunity. And in fact, I have had one of my interviews with Barry where he integrated turning adversity into opportunity, 6 strategies. He integrated them into the 5 practices, and it was an amazing chat. Now, the first strategy, and by the way, that publication was written a year after the GFC, the global financial crisis, about what they'd learned through the GFC. And as I read that book now, oh, I've got goosebumps again. It is eerily aligned to what's happening now.
Wow.
And the first strategy is relevant to your question, because when we are turning adversity into opportunity, the first strategy says, hey, guys, get out of the weeds. Remember, crises, things are very personal. And when something hurts, we get very emotionally bought into it. And our emotions are running wild. Remember, we said things are personal. And the first strategy is rise above it. And the name of the strategy is called broaden the context. And when you broaden the context, there is a role for the past. And this is really important. The role of the past is to give us context, give us hope, give us possibility. Have people survived crises before? Absolutely. Did we come out of the GFC before? Absolutely. Did humanity survive the bubonic plague? Absolutely. So when you broaden the context, what happens is when you raise above, you get yourself out of the pain and the weeds, as I call it, you're going to now be like a helicopter, and you're going to be looking down at a much bigger picture than the weeds that you're in now. And that bigger picture is the past informing you that there is hope, that there is possibility. And this is where you can get into choice. And another fundamental is leadership is a choice. So there is a space for the past, looking at the past. Obviously, there is another side to this, and that is that when you talk about past trends, they became obvious when paths were well trodden, when there was a defined path. And from traveling the path many times, that's where a trend came from. But in a VUCA world, there is no defined path. So the past in that case is one that should, when there is no path defined, that's when you have no alternative but to go and prospect the future. Now, I want to put these 3 things into, let's say, into a linear description. So there is a wonderful story that Jim and Barry tell in edition 4 of the Leadership Challenge. Let me share just a mini thing of the story and then I'll connect to your question. So the two guys were writing one of their books. I think it was Leadership Challenge edition 2, many, many years ago. Barry was in Australia on a visiting professorship in one of us, I think it was in Perth, in a university. And he had the manuscript of the book. Jim was in America and he needed the manuscript that had gone through changes from Barry over in Australia. And they were struggling in how to quickly get the manuscript from Barry to Jim, from Australia to America. Because back in those days, Australia Post was very slow, and it still is actually, and very expensive. And they didn't have time for that. And so what they did was they realized, okay, there's a thing that people are sort of talking about in the forces and in education, and it was the ARPANET, the version 1 of the internet. And that's where they realized, wow, Barry said, if I attach this file to an email and I send it through the ARPANET, wow, Jim will be able to get it. And they tell that story for a reason, that they lost an opportunity. Because during a crisis, and this was a crisis to them, when we reflect on the past, yes, we can then attend the present, yes, but if you do that without keeping one eye on the future, you're going to lose opportunities. And that's exactly what happened. And they still to this day talk about, had they been doing this book exchange with one eye on how to build a business that's going to make us a millionaire, they would have probably realized a new way of using the ARPANET. They could have copyrighted it, or what do you say, trademarked it, and become the owners of the internet. And I use that example as well when we talk about managers today. Managers today, even during a crisis, they have to manage. Management is getting things done. They have to keep the system going, like banking. We have to keep the deposits, the withdrawals, all those things going. But we shouldn't, as managers, be building systems that are required today without one eye on the future. And that's like when I say, raise your head from the present and look at the horizon. So in relation to your question, and I'm hoping I'm answering your question, there is a role for the past. And the past can give us perspective that things are not as impossible as they seem. However, if you do reflect on the past and you attend the present, don't forget you've got to be prospecting the future at the same time, which will help you take a trend to inform you, but probably have to find new ways to then prospect the future.
I see what you're trying to say here. So maybe we don't have the same calamities, the same problems, but we do have probably a similar process and similar trends, so we can learn from these, approaching these.
Yes, and I like what you ended there with. Yes, we can learn from the past, but we can also then move forward beyond it. We learn from the past to keep us informed. Broaden the context. Wow, it is possible to get through this. Yeah, it's not doom and gloom. And if we get through it using new ways, an eye on the future, we're going to get through it, building a system that won't knock us in the next pandemic, or the system will be able to cope even if another pandemic comes along. So I think there is a role for the past trends, and allow that to keep perspective, keep us informed, but then bring your challenge to the process in, prospect the future, and know, and remember I said build that picture, inspire others, and others will always extend the picture anyway.
You've mentioned a while back about, virtual and challenging the process through virtual and all that. And as I was thinking about, the behaviors of TLC, I was thinking about how impactful are those behaviors when it comes to the virtual world? Can they still have the same level of impact? I mean, look at us now. A lot of people are learning how to lead remote teams and, you know, to be in a virtual context. So does it still apply? Is it applicable? Is it as impactful as it is face-to-face?
Beautiful question. I'm going to start with making a statement. People are people. Their sensory bodies, they're bodies of senses. So we can hear, we can see, we can touch, we can taste, we can smell. People are people. They are not the situation. And going back to Emirates, I spent many hours helping these people to see they are not the redundancy. They are a person who's been put into a redundant context. And leaders have choices to decide to allow the context to define them or not. And if allowing the context to define them brings opportunity and positiveness, great. And if allowing the context to define you brings negativity, you've got another choice, not to go there. So the virtual world is something that we are being embedded into. We are still human beings. We are still people who want to know, like, and trust the person who is leading us. We are still people who want to know where he or she is going to take us. We are still people who are wanting to know how we're going to get there and be part of the picture. So the context of digital world or the virtual world, you can allow it to overpower you, or you can allow it to be something you want to partner with for greater returns. So for example, and I'm assuming, can I just clarify that when you say the virtual world, that includes the digital world as well?
It's the whole new context and platforms.
Yeah. So if I was to think of the banking industry, something very close to you, and the banking industry is doing a lot less face-to-face, and a lot more things can be done online. So there is an example of change. Now, you as a leader can choose to say, wow, the customers want more convenience. That means putting everything online as long as it's secure, and that means I have less contact with them. If that's what you're saying, you're allowing the digital world to dictate to you. Oh, there's less time I can connect with a customer because everything's done online. Well, in fact, I see it in another way. How wonderful that everything's being done online, because the customer's getting what he's wanting. Through that, I'm able to print reports that show me data of what Mr. Smith of Smith Street did today. And I, as a leader who is trying to have people work through things that, you know, maybe they're struggling, I could pick up that report and choose to have my team service that person with personal calls once a month and say, wow, I see you've used our digital services 6 times this month. How's it been? So the context could even give you new ideas in how to better the service of the bank. So, you know, remember, leadership is an art, and art is emotion. So leadership, everyone can be a leader. So where are you bringing that personal connection into anything that you're doing during crisis? So let me ask you a question in relation to your question. Are these behaviors really still valid? 2 questions for you. Which function does not depend on human interaction at all? That's question 1. And therefore, question 2, which of the 30 behaviors that you know we have, which of the 30 behaviors do not require human interaction and therefore could not work or may not work in the virtual world. And I've been puzzling over the first question all my career. And I'll go back and connect to when I was a lot younger. I was the night manager in a hotel. And I used to think to myself, even though I was very responsible, I used to think if they hired someone who wasn't responsible, this whole shift could happen and I could go shopping in a midnight mall because nothing happens. And it's not true, because the key reason or the key function of the night manager in a hotel, many people don't know this. Yes, there's service with people walk in, but there's a button that has to be pressed. And if that button is not pressed at 12 midnight with a certain few variables, the next day, everybody's account from every hotel room will still be showing yesterday's expenditure and won't be able to accept expenditure today. So
Wow.
even something as simple as pressing a button is leadership, because if I don't do that, then the guest experience goes down. So in essence, the way I would answer your question is with another question. Because we're human, and until this digital world turns each and every one of us into a computer, Ghada, can you tell me one of the 30 behaviors that does not require human interaction? And that should answer the question that you asked me. Is TLC still relevant in today's digital world?
True. True. And we can sense it. I mean, look at us, Debbie, this is the first time, we do this. And I can feel your energy, your answers are really inspiring me, and I can really feel it big time. So definitely the behaviors are showing, and TLC is written all over you very clearly.
Yeah, well, unfortunately or fortunately, it's there. Only because I find you can live and breathe it in any situation. And may I share with the Burganers on our behalf, Ghada, I mean, you and I had our own little crisis just recently. And for the Burganers, we were ready to do this so that we could allow you all to interact with the likes and everything on a live Instagram. Oh my goodness. We had a huge crisis when we discovered, luckily we practiced and discovered that UAE has blocked the live chats. And, we had to go right back through the 5 practices for us to be able to get to this solution. So, even in an Instagram world, even when we were struggling with that, TLC helped.
And look at us, we're doing so well. So now I'm sure everybody can really enjoy it,
Yeah.
So we'll see how,
Yeah, very
good.
true.
This is brilliant. This is my last question to you was, what message would you like to send them?
Well, that's one
So
message.
what would you like to tell our Burgan leaders as a closure, for this session?
Okay, well, I won't count that one. That was a message, but I won't count that one. I had a huge aha moment about leading in crisis, and I want to share it with you because to me, the message in this is so powerful. It was around the end of March. I'm not sure about Kuwait, but we went into lockdown here. And we went into a system of you were only allowed out if you were going to the groceries or to the doctors.
Same here. I think same everywhere.
Did you have to get a permit?
Yes.
I don't know.
Online, on an app, a special app.
Yeah. And so this particular day, I went in, I got a permit, I had to go to the office. And as I was driving back, and it was just fate that I was meant to be in the car listening to the radio. And it was an amazing little something that came out that I think is relevant to this conversation. Helen Farmer is a lifestyle, she interviews on the radio, and it's a lifestyle program. And she was interviewing a lady who was a mother of a 5-year-old child. And there was a psychologist on the program as well. And remember, everyone can be a leader. I don't know if you use the video of Kumar in your workshops. And now he's only 4, and he was a great leader, a great example of leadership. So the mother started talking about her 5-year-old and how the 5-year-old is coping during the pandemic. And she said that that morning, the 5-year-old had come up to the mother and said, "Mummy, can you get Google for me?" And the mum said, "Oh, you want to talk to Google?" And she said, "Yeah." She said, "Oh, what do you want to ask Google?" And the little girl said, "I want to ask Google," this is an amazing thing, "I want to ask Google how long COVID is going to go on for." Now, why is this so important to you, the bank, the leaders? Because what that little girl was doing was she was herself recognizing that in times of crisis, we all need to turn to something that will give us some level of predictability. No matter how bad the crisis is, we need to hold on to a structure that we can depend on. And in that little girl's world, Google has never let her down. Google has always
got all the answers.
Has always given her answers. And the psychologist actually came in and said to the mother, "You need to keep an eye on her, because when she realizes that Google can't give an answer to this, she may feel very let down." However, why am I telling this story? I want to end as you're ending with this. What structure do your leaders in Burgan rely on during these 5, 6, 7 months? What structures are your leaders using to bring about some level of predictability? And my guess is the leaders, so you've got so many different levels, the top levels, their structure that they can predict and rely on is the next level, because they've built cohesive and willing teams. And therefore, this should be going down unless we haven't been empathic leaders and people have lost trust. So the question is, what's the structure behind high-performing teams? 1, it's absolutely a very clear set of healthy relationships. And number 2, those relationships working within a framework such as TLC and the 5 practices of exemplary behavior. That is my takeaway, or my gift to you, that the 5 practices are there as a structure, and one that will bring you some solace no matter how bad or how long this pandemic goes. I've been relying on it and calling on it from the day lockdown started in March, and it's never let me down yet. And when I combine that with the beautiful set of relationships that I've surrounded myself with and I've nourished and nurtured, so we've got huge amounts of trust and sharedness, I know I'm safe, and I know I'm happy, and I know I can serve no matter how bad this crisis gets. So that's probably my last word, and I hope
Thank
that's
you so much. Yes, I
from.
think you've already done a wonderful job, embedding, and planting those seeds in all of us. And
oh, and there's the puppy dog saying it's time to end.